welcome. I want to talk today about Ethel Turner's The Family at Misrule. And I'm very pleased to be able to record about Ethel Turner, one of Australia's great 19th, early 20th century children's writers. So, The Family at Misrule was a sequel to the incredibly popular Seven Little Australians, and the theme of it is growing up, and a sub-theme is education. So that's specifically what I'm going to talk about today, the issue of education. So one of the themes is that it's very obvious that the girls in the family get a second-rate education, especially compared to the boys. So by this stage, Bunty is at a private school and Pip is at university, but for the girls in the family, there's nothing but third-rate governess at best. All right. On the other hand, they can supplement their education with a course of private reading, which Meg does successfully in the book, and Nellie does unsuccessfully. And I think that it's important to note that this is one of those 19th century novels which has chapter headers, fallen out of favour now, but at the top of each chapter there's a little bit of poetry, and I think that Turner is using this as an opportunity to show that she, is incredibly well read and does have a wide-ranging education, despite the fact that she herself, didn't go to university. So I hope you enjoyed. This is about themes of education in The Family at Misrule. So we get to see a scene in the nursery where Meg's supposed to be giving lessons to Peter and Poppet and supervising Nellie. As it says, the last nursery governess had left suddenly and the captain had professed himself unable to afford another one until the next quarter. Meg used to provide herself with a book during these daily struggles to be indulged in at times when her supervision was not required. It had been an improving book for the last month, for she had been lately finding out how woefully ignorant she was when she talked to the young man who came to listen to her playing. Today it was Browning, because he had looked horrified to find out she had never read any of his poems, on the plea that he was acknowledged to be difficult to understand. So she unfortunately chooses some hard poems, and while she's struggling with them, the three kids all sneak off and go and have a holiday. Her first thought, when she'd read the piece through, was that Browning was not a true poet, however great a man he might be, and her second, that Alan Courtney, the guy she eventually marries, must be exceedingly clever to be able to enjoy such reading. Her third was sorrow at the poor brain she felt she must possess not to be able to enjoy it too. And while she's reading, the others sneak out, which is pretty typical for the level of education that they're getting. Another scene where Nellie feels repentant because she'd caused all this trouble by sneaking out to the dinner party. She thinks she should improve herself, and she says, "Why, I haven't read anything better than Jessie Fothergill and Rhoda Broughton this year," she said in a tone of stern surprise at herself. Meg makes some suggestions about what she might read to improve herself, and says, "You can then gradually go to something deeper," she said. "I'm afraid you might be discouraged if you start with anything more solid just yet." But Nellie's zeal is too tremendous for half measures, and she chooses some ridiculously difficult books. So, the author's Nellie lists are notoriously sensational and frivolous, and actually sound fabulous to me. So, Jessie Fothergill, 1851 to 1891, was British. Her third novel, The First Violin, which made her name, was originally published anonymously to protect her family. And it was rejected by two publishers because one character is a married woman who has an affair. And they thought it wouldn't be well received, but they were mistaken. It had considerable sales in Britain and the United States. And I'll read a quote. "Her novels often portrayed characters of dubious moral fibre, which proved popular with the reading public." Rhoda Broughton, 1840 to 1920. Her first novel was Not Wisely But Too Well, and appeared in 1867, having been previously serialised in the Dublin University magazine, which was edited by her uncle Sheridan Le Fanu, himself quite sensational. It's about a woman considering an affair. So I actually enjoyed all the comments on this, and I'm going to go off and read it, because Anthony Trollope commented in his autobiography that she has made her ladies do and say things which ladies would not do and say. The novelist and critic Mrs. Oliphant was horrified by Broughton's uncleanly suggestions, and her novels were banned by circulating libraries until the 1870s. Lewis Carroll wouldn't attend parties or gatherings where she was present. Wilde despised her. And despite, or perhaps because of these criticisms, Broughton's work was incredibly popular, and she once responded, "Since the public like it hot and strong, I'm not the person to disoblige them." Nell feels too strongly that she needs to, improve herself, so she chooses ridiculously difficult novels and works. Sartor Resartus, an 1836 novel by Carlyle, which is mocking Hegel and German idealism. I've read it. It's not a light read. The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, 1776. It's a classic work of economics, but again, not a light read. Marcus Aurelius, which is Meditations. It's a sort of a literary monument to duty and service as a form of government. He was obviously a Roman emperor and a Stoic philosopher. Mazzini's essays on the duties of man. So he was an Italian politician who was writing in the 19th century. Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, 6-volume work by Edward Gibbon, the historian, an 18th century historian, and again, an exciting material, but pretty long. And Johnson's Restless, a work about bliss and ignorance by Johnson, an 18th century writer. The family at Misrule had chapter headers, and these were by a variety of poets that Turner enjoyed. So the first one is by Omar Khayyam, That Spring Should Vanish with a Rose, 11th century Persian poet, also mathematician. Then there's Juvenal, the ancient Roman satiric poet. Robbie Burns, a Scottish romantic. And then we get a chapter header from Anna Letitia Waring, who was a Welsh poet and Anglican hymn writer. Then Diana Maria Mullock Craik, who is a Victorian female poet who believed in greater freedom of opportunity for women. We get to the quote, "Happy in this, that she is not yet so old, but may learn happier than this. She is not so bred so dull, but she can learn." That's Shakespeare from The Merchant of Venice. Then we get another female poet, Margaret Sangster, American poet who wrote hymns and sacred texts. And we've got Burns again, followed by Charles M. Dickinson, who I'd never heard of but was a massively popular American poet in the 19th century. Browning, Longfellow, a couple that I couldn't identify, for Boys Say Love Me or I Die. Anyone who knows, please let me know. And to Mr. O'Malley in Foreign Parts, again, anyone who knows, just let me know. We've got Sarah Chauncey Woolsey as a poet, but you probably know her as Susan Coolidge, who wrote What Katie Did. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, George MacDonald, who was a fairy tale writer as well as a poet. Browning, and then Thomas Hood, Longfellow, Shelley, Tennyson again, Mary Grant Carmichael, who is a poet, and I couldn't find a picture of her, and Browning again. So, basically a very heavy selection of Victorian poets, but a surprising number of female poets. just wanted to add one thing about that list of chapter headers. Do you notice how much Browning there was? It's kind of funny, given that Turner was saying, "Oh, it's very difficult to appreciate Browning. He's a difficult poet," and then having Meg, unable to comprehend him, and then she in her chapter headers is like, "Oh, but I do. Here we are. Like a few allusions that I'll just carelessly make because I understand Browning." I found that really funny. I feel like I've given you a swift overview of a whole lot of authors that are referenced by Turner in this book. But I just wanted to summarise it with a couple of points. One, the education that the girls receive, particularly in this book, is second-rate. But two, it's supplemented by courses of reading. And three, in her selection of chapter headers, Turner is herself demonstrating that she has, a great deal of knowledge of poetry, and that she's read wisely and widely. So there's quite a lot being said, not just at the level of the text, but also the subtext about education and women and their role in society. I've enjoyed these novels, not as much as the Mary Grant Bruce ones, but nonetheless, and I would strongly recommend that people read them.